Hey, y'all. I've always believed that the shows that we binge and the movies we love are more than just entertainment. They're a window into who we are and who we might become. They're a place to talk about what truly matters. Welcome to Culture First, Democracy Always. I'm Tasha Pierce. Think of me as your favorite auntie who could talk about the latest sci fi flick 1 minute and then get to talking about voter suppression the next. On this podcast, we break down pop culture from the movies and TV shows you love to the books you can't put down to talk about power, talk about freedom, and talk about survival. We'll connect these stories to our current politics and the constant, everyday resistance we all face. Because culture shapes who we are, and democracy is the freedom to be that person. Culture first, democracy always. Hey, y'all. Before we get into this episode, I'm going to give you a little prelude of what we are about to get into over the next, say, 15 minutes. Okay, so I'm going to make a little admission to you guys today for you guys who did not know. I am a diehard Trekkie. I love nearly all things Star Trek. And I could not be talking about the most powerful political messages in pop culture history without adding in this particular episode of Star Trek The Next Generation. It's called The Drumhead. It is one of the best hours of TV that you would ever want to watch, and it has become even more significant given the times that we are in currently. So the setup is there's some sabotage on the Enterprise. We're going to get into all of that a little later. I just want you to feel the power behind first the interrogation by Admiral Satie, and second, the response given by Jean-Luc Picard. Okay, here we go.
Tell me, Captain, have you completely recovered from your experience with the Borg?
Yes, I have completely recovered.
It must have been awful for you. Actually becoming one of them. Being forced to use your vast knowledge of Starfleet operations to aid the Borg. Just how many of our ships were lost? 39? And a loss of life, I believe, measured at nearly 11,000. One wonders how you can sleep at night, having caused so much destruction. I question your actions, Captain. I question your choices. I question your loyalty.
Now, my first time hearing that had me wanting to take off my earrings and grab the Vaseline because I go hard for Captain Jean-Luc Picard. But I should have known, silly me, that Jean-Luc Picard's clapback was going to be epic. Epic. Because what Admiral Satie was doing in this moment was taking basically Jean-Luc Picard being tortured, actually having information extricated from him in a manner that could only be likened to assault. And she turned that to make a problem with his loyalty. So, first and foremost, shame on you, Admiral Satie. But secondly, let me stand back, hold me back, y'all, because Jean-Luc Picard's clap back, like I said, epic, epic.
You know, there are some words I've known since I was a schoolboy. With the first link, the chain is forged. First speech censured, the first thought forbidden, first freedom denied, chains us all irrevocably. Those words were uttered by Judge Admiral Satie as wisdom and warning. First time any man's freedom is trodden on. We're all damaged. I fear that day.
How dare you? You who consort with Romulans, invoke my father's name to support your traitorous arguments.
A hit dog hollers, Admiral Satie. Now, if you didn't want your dad's words to be used to admonish you when you're trying to steal the rights of others, you probably shouldn't be trying to steal the rights of others. Am I right? This was a perfect example of how a witch hunt goes awry. And look, if you go and clap back against somebody, use their daddy's words. John Luke had that in his pocket, like, I cannot wait to be able to say these words to somebody. Who knew it was going to be the man's daughter? I know this is fiction. This is just television, but it is beautifully written, beautifully acted, and the sentiment behind it, even though this episode came out over 30 years ago, remains relevant right now. All right, now we're going to get into the episode for real.
What's up, friends, and welcome back to Culture First, Democracy Always. We are kicking off our Fractured Future arc today by going straight to the gold standard of political sci-fi, Star Trek: The Next Generation. We are tackling the episode, The Drumhead. You ever notice how something small can get blown way out of proportion? A spark turns into a blaze, a slip-up becomes a scandal, and suddenly everybody's on trial for something they didn't even do. That's what happens in this Star Trek story we're talking about today. A little incident, some sabotage, gets inflated into an existential threat. And the hunt for the danger becomes far more dangerous than the sabotage itself. We're talking about why internal witch hunts are the ultimate threat to civil liberties. And we can't get there without a roadmap, so here's our plan for today. I'm going to start by breaking down how a witch hunt actually works and how fast keeping people safe becomes testing everybody's loyalty. Then we'll look at the playbook, the coerced confessions, the way skepticism is turned into proof of guilt, and how political loyalty tests dismantle free thought. After that, we'll talk about the fight to protect due process. The rules matter more than who we like or don't like. And we'll wrap up with what all this means for us right now, because resisting paranoia is not just once in a while. It's a constant civic duty. This is Culture First, Democracy Always. I'm Tasha. Let's dive in. Part 1. The Anatomy of the Witch Hunt. When Admiral Satie shows up, on paper, she's there for a good reason. Somebody sabotaged the flagship of the Federation, the Enterprise. That's some serious stuff, y'all. That's worth investigating. And Satie is a decorated war hero, a famous prosecutor, and she promises to get to the bottom of ish. She's going to find the truth and restore security to our favorite ship and amongst our favorite crew. But you see how fast things shift. We go from find the saboteur to prove you're loyal. It's no longer about evidence or guilt. It's about vibe checking people's beliefs. The line between safety and suspicion gets erased, and suddenly everyone is looking over their shoulders. The investigation suffers from mission creep. It starts with a simple technical failure, but Satie, driven by an almost religious zeal, keeps expanding the circle of suspicion until she's investigating everyone from the ship's engineering crew to Captain Picard's own counsel to the man himself, y'all. The scope expands far beyond the crime and becomes a fishing expedition into people's private beliefs and associations. This is exactly how witch hunts always work. They don't just punish a single person. They change the whole atmosphere. Historically, you saw this with the Palmer raids after World War I, where a small fear of Bolshevism was used to justify the widespread arrest and deportation of thousands of immigrants and suspected leftists, all without basic due process. The initial fear was real, but the response was a massive, rights violating overreach. In our current environment, we see this when the tools designed for counterterrorism or national security are repurposed against ideological opponents. The rhetoric of the Trump administration, for instance, has utilized this tactic by labeling political protesters or critical journalists as enemies of the people, or suggesting they be treated like domestic terrorists. This is classic mission creep, taking an immense power originally justified by a massive threat and applying it to silence political criticism. And hey, once due process is pushed to the side, fear fills that space. People stop asking what happened and start asking, am I next? So when we allow a small, legitimate fear to justify extreme, unaccountable measures, the mechanism of security becomes the greatest threat to all of our civil liberties. Part 2. Loyalty tests and thought policing. The way Admiral Satie runs that investigation is the ultimate authoritarian playbook. It feels very familiar because it's a strategy perfected not over decades, but over centuries. She leans on half-truths and rumors. She bullies frightened people into saying what she wants and treats any pushback as evidence that you gotta be hiding something. In her court, skepticism isn't rational, it's proof of complicity. If you defend a colleague, you are suspicious. If you ask about the rules, you are resisting the truth. This is thought policing. It's not about finding crime. It's about defining acceptable belief and punishing those who deviate. And one of the more chilling historical parallels to Satie's court is the McCarthy era, those blacklists of the 1950s. People were not convicted of treason. They were often blacklisted and lost their entire careers simply for associations or for refusing to answer questions about their beliefs. The crime was ideological nonconformity, not action. There's no evidence, no trial, just social and economic exile. And we're hearing the same thing in our politics right now. We have leaders talking about who's quote unquote anti-American or anti-Christian, like belonging means passing some kind of ideological purity test as defined by them and their administration. This is being weaponized aggressively in schools and workplaces and public discourse. Look at the efforts to ban books and censor history curriculum under the guise of protecting children. This is Satie's logic. The state gets to define acceptable belief, and anything outside that definition becomes a punishable defect. The rhetoric of the Trump administration has been clear on this, classifying certain ideas like critical views on capitalism or specific historical perspectives. Those have been classified as threats to keep justifying the stripping away of the rights of those who hold these beliefs. And then here's the big one. Once these loyalty tests become normalized, no one is untouchable. The circle always widens. The moment Satie begins to investigate Picard's close friend and mentor, we see the danger. Yesterday's accusers can become tomorrow's accused because the goal is not to eliminate a threat, but to eliminate dissent. I mean, think about the phrase political loyalty test. Have you seen any recent examples or recent actions, locally or nationally, where politicians use vague terms like extremist or un-American to target their ideological opponents. And how does that action make you feel about your right to speak freely? Let me know. I'm interested in your thoughts. Part 3: The Erosion of the Constitution. Here's what makes the story so powerful. Captain Picard doesn't want to fight about who sabotaged what or who's guilty of what belief. He says, hold up, wait. He says, it's not about that. It's about the process. Picard understands that the Constitution, the Starfleet Code, and the principles of the Federation are not just documents. They are the rules of the democracy. They are the shared agreement that guarantees civil liberties for everyone, even for the people you despise. Picard argues that once due process gets broken, once we let fear decide how justice works, we've already lost. We've validated authoritarian methods. The short-term win of catching a potential saboteur becomes a long-term disaster because we have proven that our own institutions don't believe in the rules. Historically, we see this attack on due process anytime fear is at a high level. The suspension of the writ of habeas corpus during periods of national crisis, or the internment of Japanese Americans during World War II, were justified as necessary short-term wins for security. But they were long-term constitutional disasters. In our political environment today, we see this when leaders constantly attack the independence of the justice system, the judges, the Department of Justice, the FBI. When those institutions investigate them or their allies, they are a problem. This isn't just criticism. It's an attack on the foundational integrity of due process itself. It attempts to dismantle the legal process that holds the powerful accountable. We also see this attack on due process anytime a marginalized group's rights are treated as optional. Think about immigrants who are swept up by ICE and deported without having access to adequate legal representation or judicial review. When the government streamlines a system that removes a non-citizen who is still a person with inalienable rights from the country without proper due process, it makes every American citizen's rights less secure. It normalizes the idea that the government can simply bypass the legal process when it finds a group inconvenient. Protecting due process is about moral integrity, not legal convenience. It's easiest to sacrifice someone else's rights, especially when they are unpopular. But what Picard is saying is simple. Defending civil liberties is hardest when people are scared, but that's exactly when it matters the most. If we violate due process to ensure safety, we prove that our fear is more powerful than our freedom. We become the very thing we claimed we were fighting against. It's not about avoiding threats. It's about how a free society chooses to meet them. And if we let paranoia set the rules, we don't have freedom left to defend. The integrity of our democracy is measured not by the people we protect, but by the civil liberties we grant the people we disagree with. Well, fortunately, by the end of the episode, the witch hunt collapses. Satie, consumed by her own zealotry, turns on Picard and her bias is exposed. Truth comes out. The paranoia unravels, and the Federation remembers that protecting rights isn't optional. It's survival. And that's where we land today. The real reason is this: defending due process doesn't mean you agree with the person on trial. It means you agree with the principle that nobody should lose their rights just because they're disliked or just because they're inconvenient. That is the highest form of civic courage. So here's the action I'm leaving you all with. When we start seeing that paranoia creep into a conversation or a headline or even just some local gossip, let's resist that, y'all. We can remind one another that suspicion is not guilt, and defending the process is our shared responsibility. That's civic duty. That's daily democracy. A reminder, if you want the deeper dive, the historical analysis of the Red Scare, the articles on government surveillance, and the tools to resist ideological loyalty tests, join the community from my Thursday newsletter drop. You can find the link to subscribe in the show notes. You can also connect with me on Blue Sky, Threads, and Instagram at Culture First Always, so we can keep building this community together. Because per usual, culture first, democracy always. I hope this episode gave you a new way to look at the stories around you. It's so easy to feel alone in this work, but remember, there's a whole community of grown folks out here connecting the dots. If you're not already subscribed, my newsletter drops every Thursday and provides a deeper look at these themes. It's like an email from a friend who's just a little obsessed with connecting culture and politics. You can find the link in the show notes. And also, let's connect on social media too. I'm on Blue Sky, Threads, and Instagram, and I just love continuing these conversations with you all throughout the week. Thank you so much for listening. Be sure to tune in next Wednesday for the next episode. And I'm Tasha Pierce. Culture first, democracy always.